All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl Johnson with Cleared Systems, and today I would like to take some time out to discuss who is responsible for protecting CUI, specifically around flow down requirements. And if you've ever worked as a federal contractor or defense contractor, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Understanding the flow down requirements is probably one of the biggest frustrations that we hear from our customers. Now that CMMC 2.0 is final and has been released, um, it's even more confusing for a defense contractor to understand exactly who is responsible for CUI. And a lot of times there is not any clear documentation from either the agency level or even information that you find online from government resources. So I want to take some time just to break it down. If you have any questions after this quick segment, reach out to us and I can most definitely explain further. But from that, let's break down who is responsible for protecting CUI. So first and foremost, before we go anywhere, let's first understand what exactly is CUI. Sometimes I hear people refer to it as CUI, but it's CUI, which stands for Controlled Unclassified Information, which in a nutshell means that we are making sure that any documents from a federal agency is safeguarded and protected. It does not mean that the documents are classified, but in some cases, it can be if we have enough CUI. Then, if you put that CUI together, you can come up with classified material, which is all the more reason why it's important to protect CUI. I won't go into it in this slide, but some of the feedback that I hear is that, oh, this is just a plain old document. There is no need to put any markings on it. That is not the right way to look at it. Look at any document that you are handling that has come from an agency or a prime contractor. Look at it as CUI. Okay, so what does CUI look like? I'm going to keep things very simple because depending on the agency, we can go into all different avenues and different ways of looking at CUI and especially the different disseminations and categories. So to keep things simple, CUI is just like you see it on your screen where you have a marking on your document, normally either in the header or in the footer that has the word CUI on it. Of course, we can go down and there's many different categories of CUI to choose from, but the very bare basic that you should have on any document is the words CUI. If you remember many years ago, there was, you might have seen FOIA or For Your Eyes Only, different things like that. For now, think of when we're talking about CUI, just to make sure that the marking of CUI is on the document. That's the bare minimum that you would need. Additionally, you would have some circumstances where we have a dissemination. For instance, maybe you have not for release to foreign nationals, especially if we're talking about ITAR. That comes up a lot. Fed only. Distribution is limited, and sometimes it will specify the actual agencies it's referring to. And also, you would have where you would have specified certain countries only. And again, in a lot of cases, it would specify the entity or the countries that can review that document. But the takeaway here is that at the very basic level, you should have the words CUI either in the header or the footer of your documents. And at the same time, if you're receiving documents from, say, an agency or a prime contractor, it may already have CUI in the header or footer, and that you must continue that as you communicate, as you documents at rest, documents in transit, keeping CUI in the back of your mind when you're working with these documents. Okay, now let's start with flow down of CUI. We're going to first start at the agency level. And in this example, let's say this agency happens to be Department of Commerce procurement, right? You're working a contract with Department of Commerce. The documents that are going back and forth, you would notice right away that Department of Commerce has put CUI label or markings on these documents. As you might be the prime, you would have to continue putting CUI on these documents. And this doesn't mean just the original documents, but any additions to these documents, any communications such as emails referring to these documents, or let's say for instance an attachment, is also part of CUI. So some of the confusion comes that, oh, only the document that we receive from the agency has to have the markings. But no, it really means any of the documents that are connected to that document, including emails, must also have CUI label. In the old days, we may also have included USB sticks that may have CUI, or CDs or DVDs that would also have to have the markings of CUI. As the contract flows from the prime contractor, you start to go into the subcontractor. This is also where sometimes the fuzziness takes place, because a lot of times the prime contractor may or may not always include the CUI, even though the CUI was originally there from the government agency. You as a subcontractor, it's important to ask the prime contractor, does this document require CUI markings? Do not assume because you received the document and there's no markings that document does not need any marking on it. That's where you can get yourself into trouble. And the same is true when we're talking about a tier 2 subcontractor, right? A sub of a sub, right? Even at the tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4, markings are required. All right. So it's, even though you are a subcontractor, you are just as responsible as the prime contractor, and do not assume that because the documents do not have markings on them, that they do not need markings. It's best to have an email or some kind of communication that you are asking the prime of if the documents require any markings. Now, what are the prime contractor's role? Right? Let's break down the main responsibility for protecting CUI. Right? So as the prime contractor, it's just like I said with the subcontractor. It's your responsibility to go back to the agency and ask to make sure that the documents require CUI markings. Now, when we were talking about CUI, it's easy also to bring up DFARS 252. DFARS 252 has been around for a long time. It's getting a lot of attention now because of NIST 800-171 and CMMC, and kind of everyone is grouping DFARS in with the other regulations. But really, DFARS has been around for a long time. As a prime contractor, even as a subcontractor, it is your responsibility that you are complying with DFARS 252. And that is, of course, part of the CUI. Passing the compliance directly to the subcontractors, again, you're going to see this over and over and over again. Many of our customers are more so a subcontractor than they are a prime contractor. So this is all the more important that you understand who is responsible for CUI. And by all means, please communicate directly to the prime to make sure you have clear instructions of how you deal with the document. Now, with your flow down clauses, and you'll see this in any contract that you have with either the prime or even with the agency itself, you'll see some clause in there ensuring that subcontractors meet the same CUI protections as the prime, right? So if there is an issue, the prime contractor is just as responsible as the sub, meaning If a subcontractor gets in trouble for not marking documents correctly, normally the prime is going to be questioned just as well, right? So the responsibility lies on everyone, from the agency going all the way down to the many tiers of subcontractors. The same is true, right? When we're talking about subcontractors, as I mentioned, making sure that everyone complies with CUI markings, no matter what tier it is. And even so, in some cases, I have customers that is a one-man shop or one-man manufacturer, and they say, well, we're only one person. We only do one simple simple thing for another subcontractor. Does CUI apply to us? And yes, CUI also applies to you. So the verification of compliance. Verification of compliance, I think in the future, you're going to see this more and more and more, right? So as there in the early on, there wasn't a lot of oversight from a contractor, but now I will say you'll see prime contractors most definitely looking into subcontractors, um, into how they are marking documents. And I would say not only just marking documents, but compliance as a whole, right? As we've seen with CMMC, uh, the responsibility as well as we're talking about flows directly down, right? So from the prime going all the way down to each of the subcontractors, you also have to be compliant with NIST 800-171. You also have to be compliant when it comes to CMMC and submitting your scores. Gone are the days of you just checking a box and saying, yes, we are complying with DFARS 252. Now, you will see a lot more verification coming directly from the prime contractor and then proving to them that you are compliant. I think one thing that is often overlooked is the training when it comes to CUI. And as I mentioned, I see online and I see um, lots of misinformation about CUI, and so it's important to understand exactly how your how your organization is going to handle CUI and getting the right instructions either from the agency or from the prime. Don't just assume that what you see online is the right information when it comes to categories or when it comes to dissemination. It's best just to ask. That way, you have something something in stone that you know exactly how to handle CUI. But again, don't just take what you see online because that information could be outdated. I see a lot of information is outdated. Just make sure you ask either the prime contractor or you ask the agency about how to handle. Now, incident reporting. I think incident reporting is also going to be scrutinized more in the future. I do say there is lots of spills when it comes to CUI that are not reported, and I think the main reason why organizations feel they don't need to report it because they feel, well, it's not classified information, so we don't need to report it, or in a lot of cases that they don't necessarily know how to report an incident. If you have any kind of spillage, data breach, reporting this to the prime contractor is important. If you are a prime contractor, reporting this to the agency is important. And this should not be just a verbal phone call. You need to put in writing what exactly occurred, when you think it occurred, um, and what is the size of the spill, what documents are involved in the spill itself, if we're talking about data itself. That needs to be reported. Don't feel like maybe a contract is going to be lost if you don't report it, or someone's going to get in trouble. It's best to self-report than to be found out later on that there has been a breach or a spill. Right? It's best to just clean it up and understand how to deal with it than to later be discovered that your organization was part of a spill. And going back into accountability, and as I said before, right, for breaches, um, basically everyone is responsible, right? So if a subcontractor is breached, the prime contractor is responsible. So even if you have a subcontractor that is 3 or 4 tiers down, guess what? Still, the prime contractor is responsible. And the same is true when we're talking about a prime contractor. They are responsible to the agency itself. So there's always going to be some layer of responsibility that takes place. What I see again in the future is that we're going to have much more monitoring of breaches, and the accountability and the responsibility of those breaches is going to increase. Whereas before, no one was really taking accountability for it. No one was really pursuing it if we're talking about small CUI breaches, because because data is so important to the federal government and to Department of Defense, and along with all the agencies. You're really going to see a crackdown of agencies coming after the prime contractors and the subcontractors, and that helps because now everyone is watching out for each other versus saying this is not my responsibility. The responsibility is shared amongst everybody. So let's conclude. Okay, in conclusion, we discussed CUI, so we know exactly what is CUI at a very basic level. And as I mentioned, we can go on and on about CUI, but at a basic level, we understand what CUI is. We understand also the flow down and who's responsible. Next steps to this: if your organization does not have proper training, does not do auditing and reporting, this is something that you should look at today. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until there's a breach or you're about to get audited by an outside company or an agency. Make sure that you're on top of that. If you need help or assistance, cleared systems, this is things that we do on a daily basis. We focus on CMMC, DFARS, NIST 800-171, of course CUI, CTI. Whichever your need is when it comes to federal regulations, cleared systems, that's what we do. So if you need help, I'm going to put links down below. Please contact us, and I will be more than happy to assist you. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. I'm going to start doing this content more and more often, so please subscribe to get notified of new sessions.